Hello, everybody. Good evening or good day to you, wherever you're watching, you're tuning in from. Welcome to the latest episode of Geo Talk, hosted by myself and the wonderful Matthew Cochran. And today we are absolutely delighted to have Christopher Mallett with us as our guest on the show this evening. And we're going to talk a lot about his career in music, and also a big part of it will be his latest recording, which is an absolutely fascinating project, which just has so much legacy and history for the guitar world. And it's just going to be, I'm dying to hear more about it myself. So wherever you're tuning in, you might be watching us on Twitter, you might be watching us on Facebook, or of course here live on Gallery Guitar, the main platform for the show. Join us, post your comments and questions. You can post them in the live chat here on Facebook, or here on YouTube. You can post them as comments on Twitter and Facebook. As we go through the discussion, it's really good to hear from you, and it's really good to just get your feedback as we go through the discussion, because it's involving everybody here in the guitar community, and hence why we have such an interesting topic to discuss this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Matthew to sort of just introduce Christopher a little bit more formally, and we've got some clips of some beautiful performances to share with you through the show as well. So over to Matthew.
Well, welcome everybody, and welcome Christopher. I'm going to talk about you for a moment, as if you're not literally on the screen listening to everything that I'm saying, and then we'll shoot over to our first question. So, for those of you who are just getting to know Christopher and his art and his teaching, Matthew and I consider Christopher to be a world-class guitar player. He's an entrepreneur. He's an award-winning guitar teacher many times over. He's one half of Duo Noir, which is a guitar duo that also features guitarist composer Thomas Flippen, who we need to have on this show sometime very soon. Duo Noir specializes in commissioning and premiering new works for two guitars. Christopher's latest solo guitar release features a work of Justin Holland. Now, Justin Holland was a 19th century American guitarist composer whose biography is utterly fascinating, as is his musical output. Christopher, would you mind giving us a bit of a thumbnail sketch of Justin Holland's life and his music?
Yeah, of course. So thanks for having me on. First off, to the two Matthews here, big fan of both of your music and super excited. Love the show. So Justin Holland, I first came across Justin Holland nearly 20 years ago. I was probably like 19 and an undergrad in San Diego before going to Oberlin. And so my dad is an artist, and he was kind of browsing the Library of Congress website, I think in like 2003, looking for some music for one of his kind of art series that he was doing at the time. And he came across a guitar piece, and he called me out to his studio, and he's like, grab your guitar, read through it. So I read through it. I thought it was really cool. It was like just an arrangement of something. And we looked at the name Justin Holland for like, let's look him up. This is pre-Google, so probably looked on like Yahoo or Ask Jeeves or something like that. But I looked him up, and then to my surprise, he was a 19th century African-American guitarist. And, I'd always kind of had an interest in music of African-Americans, and up to that point, hadn't really known much about, I didn't know any classical guitarists who are African-American from the past or the present.
Yeah.
And so I was playing like a lot of arrangements by Scott Joplin, because I did want to play music by African-American composers. So when I found Justin Holland, I was completely and utterly just shocked and surprised and excited. So then the next step was, I want to get some more of his music. The Library of Congress website wasn't like how it was today. It wasn't so easy to access music on there. So I reached out to somebody online named Donald Sauter, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. And I think he was living in Maryland, but he had this website, and it's still up. He kind of cataloged a lot of Holland's music. He recorded a lot of his music. Justin Holland arranged a lot of opera kind of pieces he called scraps of the opera. And then he would record those pieces, but he would also put what part and, that the scrap came from in that opera. So he really had this amazing website. So I reached out to him and just kind of said, what the heck, shot in the dark. I'm going to ask him to go to the Library of Congress and see if he'll get all of the music that they have there of Holland. So I wrote him. He wrote me back. He's like, sure, I'll go get it, man. So he went to the Library of Congress, didn't hear from him for about a month. And then about like a month later, just had this huge package of music arrive to my house.
Wow. You're kidding. Wait, how old are you here?
Huh?
How old are you here?
I was probably like 19 or 20. So.
Whoa. That's incredible. I mean, I remember the first time I ever heard about Justin Holland, it was in a soundboard. And I think this was back in like maybe even the Peter Danner days.
I think Peter Danner wrote an article about Holland. Was it his article?
Yeah, I mean, it very well might have been. I didn't look back at, I've got in a closet a big stack of, all the old soundboards. But that's a sloppy way of doing any kind of research. So, but I mean, I remember thinking, wow, this is super unusual. But I never really scratched that itch. So you came across this music very early. So, it's been quite some time that you've had to kind of get used to his music and to, become very familiar with it. So, what kind of stuff is there? Tell us about, what kind of works are we looking at when we're looking at Justin Holland's music?
Sure. So, I mean, a majority of what survives of the music are arrangements. And, so kind of the arrangements are what were popular in the day. So there were a lot of human variations, just straight arrangements or transcriptions of piano pieces that were popular at the time in America and in Europe. And then a lot of the opera pieces as well, which were popular on all instruments. So there's solo pieces. There are quite a few duos that I have for two guitars. And then I have a few pieces for voice and guitar as well, which are arrangements. So, but yeah, I mean, like probably like 99.9% of those are arrangements. And there's one, as far as I know, surviving composition, and that's called the Andante, and I recorded that on my album. And that wasn't even in that collection of music. That was published in the back of a book by this author, James Trotter, who was kind of Justin Holland's first biographer back when Holland was still alive. And it was in a book called Music and Some Highly Musical People. And they had a chapter dedicated to Justin Holland, and he wrote like, Holland's life story in there, but in the back he had that composition, which is very reminiscent to like the Soar Mozart variations, because he has like that, quick little arpeggio. It reminds me exactly of, I forgot which variation it was, but that, with that nice little rapid arpeggio.
Oh,
yeah. So, but there's said to have been that he composed like 30 something original pieces, but who knows where they are? They might
turn up. They could potentially turn up, because you've shown, you've sort of opened the door a little bit, on this, in terms, with an Naxos recording as well. It's going to sort of permeate the culture of guitar music that we have. So you might find that, like, someone out there kind of goes, wait a minute, in my library of stuff, I think I've got, or you never know, it might sort of turn up now that you've sort of started to shine a light on it,
Yeah, or an attic, who knows? It could be anywhere. I think that's how Florence Price's music was discovered.
Exactly. That's exactly how her music was discovered. Yeah.
So I mean, there's some really, Justin Holland concerto.
There's some really famous examples. I mean, wasn't it Mendelssohn and Bach's music? Like, it was wrapped up in it. Like, so the paper that he got from the printing press, or what the paper he was using, so it's almost like what we call here is like, when you get fish and chips, you get it wrapped up in yesterday's newspaper. That's what it used to be. Do you know what I mean? So you can, if you can just hold on for a day, you can read the news and have your dinner at the same time. I think it's an amazing. I mean, you were mentioning the chamber music, the voice and guitar stuff. That's not on the album. It's solo that's on the album.
Yeah, this album is completely solo. And when I was kind of pitching ideas to Naxos, we decided that this would just be kind of just popular tunes, no opera pieces, no duos. So just solo popular pieces from America and Europe. And, I'm glad that it is kind of focused on that one section of Holland, because if there are other volumes in the future, then it can kind of focus on the other aspects. But
yeah,
there's just a lot of interesting music that he arranged in there too, pieces that no one's heard really. I mean, there's a few. It's kind of weird to see it for me on like a 19th century disc, but world premieres of several pieces on there, like the like the first piece, the Delta Kappa Epsilon March, which is like reminiscent to like a Sousa march or something. But that piece never recorded on piano, as far as I can tell. And Naxos even has their department of historians look into it to make sure that I'm not making a mistake, because I'm for sure not a musicologist. But so first time recorded on guitar, and first recording out there. And I think that's just kind of special in many ways, to find music that's so American that's just never been touched before in hundreds of years. I mean, Justin Holland was born more than 200 years ago now. So yeah.
And had quite a life. I mean, in addition to okay, so I think he's born in Virginia.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, in 1819.
And he goes to school. He goes to Oberlin, like you.
He went to Oberlin. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you? I mean, you must have been aware of that. If he's a guitarist of influence to you, you must have been like. Is there any record of? I mean, are there still pieces in the Oberlin library that would, that Justin Holland had written, or were there any discoveries there?
I don't think there's any discoveries there, but I do think that someone named Barbara Clemenson, she was one of Holland's biographers and did a whole paper on Holland in the Western Reserve, which is the Cleveland area. I think she found some documents on Holland, but there's no music or anything like that. But yeah, it is kind of it's kind of special that I went to the same school that Holland went to, and then I knew that Holland had gone there, but when I made my decision to go to Oberlin, it wasn't, of course, because of that or anything.
Sure.
It was just, I really wanted to study with Steve, and I never heard of Oberlin actually. And the first time I really heard of Oberlin was in that Holland, just reading about Holland. And
really?
I kind of didn't really think about it. In California, Oberlin is not as popular as like the East Coast or the Midwest. So, but then I saw that Oberlin was coming for like the regional audition, and that's why I took it. But then I just loved the Steve and the vibe. So decided to go there. But yeah, when I went, I dragged my huge binder of Holland's music with me, of course.
Did you play it in like degree recitals and stuff?
I didn't play it at all, really, in undergrad or master's degree. I wanted to, in undergrad and stuff, and I wanted to really spend my time studying, of course, Bach and sure. Try to, I wanted to do just kind of be as traditional as I can so I can understand the rep and everything, But yeah, I mean, no opportunities. I would read through them, but I never really dug in deep into any of his music until much, much, much later. So
yeah. So why now?
Why now? Several reasons. So over the years, I've played in St. Louis for the St. Louis Guitar Society, and in Cleveland, the Cleveland Guitar Society, which are both run by amazing people. Back when I first started playing at the St. Louis Guitar Society, William Ash was the president, and William Ash is a huge advocate of just equity and equality in music. And he was a huge fan he always kind of pushed us to play music by Black composers. So, a lot of the music that we play in St. Louis were pieces by Nathaniel Dett that we arranged for guitar. He also went to Oberlin. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then Scott Joplin. One time we were in St. Louis, we actually played at Scott Joplin's house, which was kind of cool. We played a Scott Joplin concert in Scott Joplin's house.
Nice.
But he was also very open and said, like, you guys need to play some Justin Holland, which, is pretty rare to hear a presenter asking for that. So I jumped at the opportunity. I was like, yes, we'll do it. Well, of course. So we played a few duos there. And of course, at the Cleveland Guitar Society, Eric Mann is the president there. Same kind of guy, just amazing person, really open-minded. So we played Justin Holland's music in Cleveland, which makes sense because that's where Justin Holland ended up settling for most of his professional life. Yeah. But
sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was just going to say, before Holland went to Oberlin, he had kind of an adventurous life. After being born in Virginia in 1819, at an early age, he was already showing musical promise. He accidentally stumbled upon like a book of just words. I mean, like there are words to like hymns and things like that, but there are no musical notes. But he would read these words, and his biographer kind of painted this romantic portrait of him, like perched upon a fence, singing songs, making up his own melodies, only to find out later that when he heard the actual melodies of his pieces, that he felt the ones that he wrote were like better. That was pretty hilarious. But I think a lot of Holland's life is kind of shrouded in mystery, and hopefully someone will dig in deeper. I mean, in 1833, he left Virginia for Boston, and all that says is that he left Virginia. There's several reasons why he left, because in 1831, the Nat Turner rebellion happened in Virginia as well, so they were really locking down on educated Black Americans at that time. If a Black person was able to read or write, and they would basically try to take away their rights from them. So Holland was in that in climate too, but also, there's several places I mentioned that his parents passed away both of his parents passed away in 1833, and that's why he moved to Boston. But kind of I have no idea what happened. Like how did they pass away? Did they pass away like the same time? So it's a little bit mysterious in that sense. But then he made his way to Boston, and that's where he was introduced to the guitar by a guitarist named Mariano Perez at this theater in Boston called the Lions Theater. And he's just kind of saw him play. He was really interested in the guitar, talked to him, and then he introduced him to a couple of other guitar teachers in the area, Simon Nabel and William Schubert, who were part of this Ned Kendall's famous brass band. They were called brass bands at that time. Were very popular in America. Yeah. So he took lessons with them, and 2 guitar lessons and a flute lesson a week. So he was making money somehow. We're not really sure. So he could have been teaching already, but I don't think he started teaching till later. But he was making enough money to live in Boston and take music lessons for 3 different people. And both of his guitar teachers were really interested and did a lot of arranging. And I think that's kind of how he caught the bug to start arranging music. And then he left Boston to try to, he wanted to go to an actual conservatory, and he felt that Oberlin was the place. But there's an interesting letter that Justin Holland wrote to the president of Oberlin, basically stating why he should go there. He's like a hard worker. He's dedicated, and sent the letter to the president of Oberlin, and he was accepted. And that's when he moved to Oberlin to pursue his studies there. So
it almost sounds like someone's looking out for him.
I know, it's crazy. Yeah.
Sort of, invisible force in the background, just sort of, helping him navigate these, challenges, which are many, like, and just sort of, I mean, because like you say, he must have had some income to have the 3 lessons per week. Yeah. And when he was already, obviously very talented and very skilled, so he could probably make money himself through teaching and performing. But the landscape is so challenging for him. So it does feel like he's got just something, whether it be luck or and endeavor and just sort of skill and a combination of these things. But it's just phenomenal.
It really is. And I think he spent a large part of his life just wanting to gain acceptance as not just as like, a Black person, or just like he wanted to just gain acceptance as a person. He didn't want to be looked at as just like, another Black, like he wanted to work hard, and he wanted to really earn his place. And that's what he did, throughout his life. And, it's definitely something looking out for him. He definitely was always in the right place at the right time,
Well, he certainly has some pretty impressive agency, though. I mean, like I read this, and you can either confirm or prove to me that it's not true. But as I understand, he's like really into the methods of like swor and aguado, which would have only been in Spanish at that time, right? So he's got to learn to read Spanish in order to actually learn from those methods or figure out what's going on.
So that's close. I actually said that once. I said that once, and I was corrected by an actual historian, and I had to like edit something once.
Actual historians are humans too, you know.
I know, man. I was like, oh, sorry, I'm super
Yeah, but
scared
they're
now.
scary
I can't
humans,
say
you
anything
see.
wrong now, man.
Yeah.
But I think
Musicologist makes mistakes as well, you know.
yeah.
So what's the story? What's the
So at the time when I think he traveled to Mexico in like the 1840s, early 1840s to learn Spanish, so he can better understand the methods in their original language. But they were already published.
Oh, they had been published in English.
In English, yeah. I think Sohr's method was, I forgot the exact date, but I think like around 1842 or something like that. He went to Oberlin and someone corrected me and said 2 years or something prior to that. Sohr's method had already been in English, but he did want to learn from the original source, and he wanted to try to read them in their, like the Aguado method and the Sohr method. He wanted to read them in Spanish so he can really just understand exactly what Sohr was saying and not get it through a translated version.
So he goes to Mexico.
That's according, as I said, his life is shrouded in mystery. So
wow, that's intense. I mean, that is so impressive.
It may well be that Sohr's method had been published in English a year or two before, but the chances necessarily of him coming into contact with that particular publication, like the English method, the English translation of the method, how many printing copies were made? Was it more than the Spanish original? You know, because a lot of Sohr stuff was done in French, because naturally he was working the French sort of bourgeois, you know, sort of salon guitar and classical music audiences. You know, it's often we sort of find these things. Oh, well, this can't be that because this came into existence, you know, 1 year earlier and stuff like that. But I mean, it's not exactly like it was distributed on IMSLP or distributed online. Yeah. But now there's an English version and we can all download that from Google Docs. And geographically, it doesn't matter where we are on the planet. You know, I mean, right. I know the Bible's been translated into a lot of languages, but I think a lot of stuff's been missing. Like, you know, like depending on what country you're reading it in, like, you know. So I mean, I kind of feel like I'm sure, you know, that like Matt's right. He must have had not just a sort of basic pigeon grasp of Spanish, but like, you know, obviously it sounds like he's so earnest, like he just wants to learn and he wants to educate himself, and he wants, like you say, like writing that letter to the director of Oberlin to get in the door. It's like, you know, this is a guy who's not going to let, like, what does legados mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Or what does Ponticelli, like, you know, is like, I'm going to get past that pretty quickly. Like, Jude, I think this would be a good time to hear you play, Chris, because we've got some clips of you playing, and we've got a clip of the Carnival of Venice, the arrangement, obviously, that Holland made, which is really quirky, and I love it. Yeah, like it's. I mean, obviously, maybe we'll hear it, and then you could speak to some of that as well, the sort of harmonization at times, and like some of the things that go on there, because obviously we all sort of have Taraga's you know, version in the mind at times, you know, and obviously this, when people see this, they'll see the guitar you're playing as well, which is something we want to hear you sort of tell us about as well, because it's an exquisite instrument. So we'll have a little clip, and then we'll come back after that and discuss the piece, the arrangement, and the instrument too. And again, if you're listening at home, please, you know, let this provoke you to ask a question or make a comment. We'd love to hear from you too.
Nice, man.
Yeah, bravo.
Thanks. Yeah, that was recorded a couple years ago on a guitar named I think it's the Clem and Brothers. It's an American guitar built in around 1860. Very ornate, I love the way it looks. The way it feels, a little bit of a different story. I mean, it's easy to play because it's small, but the frets were like almost gone. It was like there were hardly any frets. It was kind of crazy just because they're so, worn down. But that guitar was part of a collection, or is part of a collection by this guitarist. And I think he's a banker, but he has a huge collection of guitars. His name is Jeff Wells. And he recently started a website of his collection called the Austin Marie Guitar Collection. And you asked earlier, Matt, like, how did I, when did I really start getting into Holland, recording his music and all that stuff? And it was kind of because of Jeff that this whole kind of, new interest in Holland came about. He reached out to me out of the blue. I'd never met him. And he said he'd been trying to find a guitarist who was African-American, who played Justin Holland, or who knew about Justin Holland, and he couldn't find anybody. So I had luckily done a talk on Holland for the New York Guitar Society on Zoom. This was during the pandemic. And he found that. So he reached out to me, and he was right in the Bay Area. So he had me go up there and record a few of Holland's pieces on those guitars, and did an interview with him about the life of Justin Holland. And I think that was kind of what really inspired me to say, like, okay, there's some interest in his music now, and start really pursuing it, and to have, some nice videos to be able to shop around as well. So
what condition was the guitar in?
It's actually really nice condition, just a few little cracks. I think some of the little inlays had to be replaced or glued in. And there's a local guitarist here, a repairman. His name is Alan Perlman, who's a complete wizard. He works on all those guitars, but yeah, the guitar was in like excellent playing condition. I just don't think he likes to replace the frets or anything like that. So he likes to keep it in its original condition as possible.
So were there any challenges for you coming from like a standard classical over to that instrument? Because it looks incredibly ornate. And we've got some clips we come to in a minute where you're really close up, or the camera's really close up, and we can see some of that detail and that inlay. But were there any challenges? Was there any big differences for you?
Probably just in the right hand, just getting used to the string spacing being a lot closer. Yeah. But I got used to it really fast, and it's kind of nice, to play play on a smaller guitar. Cause my main guitar is a 640 anyways. I mean, obviously that's a lot smaller, but I tend to gravitate towards a little bit of the smaller side. So that was the biggest challenge. But the only other challenge was just the left hand, trying to be as accurate as possible and keep the intonation really nice with the frets that were basically gone. Very easy to do glisted. So
it's musically, like the first time we hear a variation, you really get a deep insight into the way Holland is approaching the guitar. It's idiomatic, but it's not easy. There's a lot of like use of open strings and stuff. But this is a guy who is deeply familiar with the workings of the guitar, but also I think he's also pretty mature. I'm assuming this is, well, do we know like when this piece was written, and when this arrangement was made, and when the other publications start to show up?
I don't remember exactly when this one was published, but his biographer even refers to the Carnival of Venice as like his greatest arrangement. So, it was kind of looked at that time too as kind of one of his masterpiece arrangements. And definitely this one was made either for an advanced student or, an advanced amateur. I'm not sure how many professional guitarists there were in America touring at that time, but, definitely for someone who can play, because as you said, it feels pretty guitaristic and idiomatic, but there's a lot of stuff that's difficult. If you want to play it at that little bit of a faster speed, you want to make sure all the pull-offs are really clear. There's tons of pull-offs, and that was the hardest part
Yeah.
about this piece, to make sure that they all were really even and they sounded good. It's like you have to really pay attention to that stuff. So
You're so crisp with them. When we were listening to it there, it was like the moderns they're almost like what we call Scotch snaps over here. They're like dum dum, like this speed.
yeah.
And we call them that because, well, there's lots of different reasons, but like in a lot of like the traditional instruments, you're just taking your finger off a valve. So there's a pre-existing pitch that just goes, it just jumps down to that lower pitch. And like we have that a lot in like the ornaments, over here, like in a lot of the early sort of like Celtic music, if it's translated from bagpipes to fiddle and stuff. And it's like when you hear those dum 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 dum, it feels like it could be Galician, or it could be like some sort of like Celtic Spanish kind of like fiesta kind of thing. It's crazy, like But I think the guitar really suits those things, and you have them so crisp. It's so nice. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I think one other thing that's interesting about that arrangement is that it kind of encompasses almost kind of like just a lot of the techniques that he covers in his method, because he has a couple of methods, but it has the pull-offs, it has arpeggios, it has glisses, even throws in the harmonics because he was a big proponent of teaching harmonics. Arpeggios with the melody in it. There's just really kind of a culmination of, I feel like, everything that he kind of gathered as a guitarist, and he put it into that arrangement. You can tell he put a lot of care into that one.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. Now, I've never reviewed any of the methods. I understand one of them was like huge, like meaning like it was very successful.
Yes, the comprehensive method. The first one, it was, at the time was the most successful method in America, and even the publisher J.L. Peters in New York. There's a quote of him written that he said that he feels it's the most successful method anywhere in America and Europe. So he felt, because what it was interesting about the method is that, because he was so educated with the history of guitar. I mean, during Justin Holland's life, Aguado was alive, Soar was alive. All these guys were still living in Europe and playing, which is kind of mind blowing. But his methods were kind of a compilation of all of their methods, and he took what he felt were really important in, Kirkosi's method and Soar's method, and put it into his own method. And then
it's pumping nylon.
That's what I say. That's what I say all the time, man. I said it was the 19th century pumping nylon. That's what it was.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That makes perfect sense. Like,
I think it's great, man. It's like, it saves time. It's like, okay, I'm just going to take all the best things from all these different methods and here's one place.
But it's nice that you say that, like, then in these bigger, larger scale works, like the Carnival of Venice, you can see, well, if you apply the method, then you get to play the piece, because like the two things are backing each other up, which is nice. Yep. You mentioned J.L. Peters, because that's where I first came across like Justin Holland arrangements, but it was completely random because I was doing a trove of stuff on the net, and it was just literally to find publications of arrangements of anything, like just to sort of have a large playable repertoire of not like the most virtuosically difficult music in the world, but like stuff that's just really nice to play. And a lot of J.L. Peters like stuff, the publications, has been shared on, like, there's a French forum, the Del Camp forum, and like there's a trove of that kind of stuff there. And I remember like getting one of them and being like, oh, Justin Holland, not really giving it any thought and just thinking it's just obviously someone who's done the arrangement. But when your record came out and stuff, and we've been thinking about this show, I was wondering, like, did his publishers know he was black?
So that's great, because I think J.L. Peters and S. Brainerd and Sons were his two kind of big main publishers. He had a couple of others, but they knew he was black. Those were like the only publishers. I mean, according to one of his biographers, it's like the only people that really knew that he was black were, of course, the people in Cleveland, because he was a famous teacher there, and he would play locally. But the publishers who knew were J.L. Peters and S. Brainerd and Sons. They knew he was black, and they really, really supported him. Fantastic. A lot of other publishers had no idea. And there's even an account that he went into a music store outside of Cleveland. He went into like a music store and a music store / publisher. And he was, looking at like guitars or sheet music or something. But the workers there just paid no attention to him because he was black. They basically just wouldn't help him. So he left. He was like, all right, forget it. I'll take my business elsewhere. But then later on, that same publishing house / store ended up publishing a lot of his music, and he made a ton of money from them. And they had no idea it's the guy that they like blew off, years before.
Yeah. Yeah. So they stick it to them,
He stuck it to them.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. I just, it fascinated me because there's not, it's just, you would have no, again, also going back to that time where like, you're not supporting a release of a pedagogical book or anything like that with some videos. There's maybe no radio interviews, so there's no discernible way that someone could, unless they're dealing with them, like face to face over a table, you would have no idea, what their color of skin is or whatever it is. But at that time, that's obviously means that's make or break. That's you're included or you're not included. You're in the club or you're not in the club. So it's like, I just wondered, if there, but it's, so JL Peters did know that. And obviously you say we're really supportive, which is.
You're very supportive. And, he probably made them a lot of, he was the house arranger basically for S. Brainier and Sons and JL Peters. Every time a popular tune came out for the piano, the first thing they would do is send it to Holland and say, like, we need an arrangement for the guitar.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting because he couldn't perform really outside of Cleveland. I don't know if he couldn't, but he probably didn't want to or wouldn't be welcome to perform in a lot of places in the United States. So he didn't really go out and play. But those publishers did like a lot to help him. They were publishing his, I think S. Brainier and Sons had it was called Brainier's Musical Monthly or something. It was some sort of newsletter. They would always write about him, and that went out through the Midwest and throughout the United States. And, whenever you would see, like when you look on the back of a Mel Bay publication or something, you see the list of, all the composers and arrangers. Back then when you would look on the back of one of those S. Brainier and Sons or JL Peters, when the guitar section came up, almost every single arrangement was Holland. So, it's like probably every amateur guitarist in America came across Holland at some point, and they even say that he became a household name to guitarists, and he never really even performed.
The Wolf Marshall of the late 1800s. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I love it. It's such a cool story. It's interesting. It's, in some ways heartbreaking, but it's a real story of triumph, and luck too. He was born free. If he wasn't born free, who knows? He probably wouldn't have been able to do any of this stuff, Yeah. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can go back to that recording. Just nip into it for a little bit more, because I'm sure people want to see the guitar again and hear it again because it's so beautiful. And also just talking to some of what you were saying about, he was a big fan of harmonics and he was a big fan of the technique of things. The clip that we've got, again from Carnival of Venice, is that artificial harmonic variation, and then goes on to then sort of develop from there. So we'll hear a little bit of that. Here we go. Great stuff. Just a little brief clip, but it had such a lovely close-up of the instrument. So I thought, it was a great chance to give people a chance to see the inlay and so beautifully. And exactly, we go into that all that sludge section as well. So you can see his command of the instrument at the time, and yours now are fabulous. So it's great. So congratulations on such a beautiful, beautiful performance at Carnival of Venice.
And this beautiful project that you have, I would absolutely encourage everybody that's watching this to take a listen to this record. It's really special. But now? I'm changing the topic because the Justin Holland is one component of your musical activities, but there's so many other things that you do, actually, I was quite surprised when I saw your name attached to a 19th century project because I think of you as a modern music guy.
Yeah.
And in particular, your duo with Thomas Flippin. What you guys do to get new music made, and who you're performing it for, I think is a really sort of fascinating thing. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about Duo Noir?
Of course, yeah. So Thomas and I have been playing now for it feel old when I say 15 years now. I think we've been playing together for almost 15 years, which is a long time. And when we came together, Ben Verdery actually put us together before we were even before I was at Yale. It was the summer before I was going to Yale, and there was a Norfolk Music Festival up in Connecticut. And that year, Ben was the artistic director, and basically he had like 8 guitars come, and each guitarist was assigned to a composer. And we were assigned as a duo to play a piece by this awesome composer in New York named Ray Lustig. So the first time I met Thomas was basically, hey, what's up? Nice to meet you. Let's go rehearse. So we've kind of just been playing music together since the very first day we met. And, playing music by Ray, which was a very cool new piece. We really enjoyed the process of just sitting there, being able to work with him the whole week and just, work through the piece. And then it turned into 5 more movements. And then we recorded an EP of the 6 figments. And that was kind of our first foray into new music. And then we got the idea we just wanted to continue commissioning composers. We thought it was really interesting to play music by living composers. And when Thomas was at the Crossroads Festival, which is like a really famous festival put on by Eric Clapton.
Yeah.
It was in Madison Square Garden. He was there, and he was really shocked when he was there for, I think, 2 or 3 days. And there was not one woman guitarist in the entire festival. So he was just like, wow, this is kind of crazy, because his wife was there and like some other, and he was just like, this is really like it's just kind of strange to have like hundreds of guitars play and then they're all dudes. So then he came to me, he was just like, what do you think about commissioning, let's commission a woman guitarist. And then we started talking about it, and it just turned into an idea of just let's do a whole album of music by women composers. So we applied for a grant from Diller Quayle, which is the school where Thomas teaches. It's a great school in New York. And they gave us the money to start the project. And the first person we went to was Clarice Assad. And both, huge fan of her music, have been forever. And we told her, we really want you to write something for us. We both really like weird, crazy, fun music. And she came back. Man, it's the easiest commission ever, actually, because literally she came back a few months later with just like a perfect piece with like even fingerings. I was like, oh my God, man, this is the easiest commission ever. It was perfect. Didn't have to edit anything. And then from there, we started commissioning. We commissioned Gidi Razaz, a New York-based composer. Mary Koyamjan wrote us a really cool piece for 2 guitars and backing tracks. Gabrielle Smith, she was in Banging in a Can All-Stars. Gulfam Kayam, and Courtney Bryan, who is a jazz pianist and composer who teaches at Tulane. And, just the project we had then, a full hour of amazing music that we can go play at guitar societies. And so many times we play in guitar societies and people will come up to us and say, we've never heard, not so much anymore, but back, in 2016, 2017, 2018, when we first started playing this music, there's so many people, we never heard a piece by a woman, on the guitar before. And, when we go play in schools, we do that quite a bit. Like students will raise their hand and say, like, I didn't know that. Same thing for Black people. Like, we didn't know women and Black people wrote classical music. We're like, oh my gosh, man, this is crazy. So that's kind of been our mission with that project. But, we didn't want to slam it in anyone's face. I mean, we don't say on the album, music by women. It's just Night Triptych by Duo Noir, and then people just listen to it for the music,
Yeah. Yeah, and it happens to be very approachable, very enjoyable, music, just like anything else that's composed by great composers, right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah, it's killer, man. It's killer.
But now you hit on something that's a really fascinating aspect of your career, and I think a very unique aspect of your career, which is the amount that you, and maybe you and Thomas too, I'm not really sure, but you seem to be really dedicated to the idea of getting in front of young students, or rather young people. Like you're not exclusively playing for guitar societies and that kind of stuff. Like you guys are going out of your way to take the music that you play and put it in environments that may or may not be familiar with what's so why.
Yeah, that also started at Yale. We got a grant to play in I think like 15 or 20 schools throughout Connecticut, Harlem, the Bronx. And that was when we started. We just did like a tour over like a month of just playing almost every other day in a school in some of these areas. And we loved it so much that we just continued to do it. St. Louis Guitar Society. I mentioned them earlier, back when they first had us out there in like 2010 or 2011, they were just getting their community engagement off the ground. I think modeling it after Austin guitar, because they were kind of like they still are kind of the reigning kings of that. And with St. Louis, at that time when we first went, they had like 3 schools that they were working in. So we went and played at 3 schools. But when we went to St. Louis, like last year, I mean, they have like 36 schools now or something like that. It's amazing. And now when we go there, we play in like, 7, 8, sometimes 9 schools. And now a lot of the other guitar societies are kind of following suit. So Cleveland now does that as well. And I just really love getting in front of kids to play music, not just teach. Obviously I teach a lot of kids too with Suzuki method and all that, but playing for kids in some of these areas in Cleveland and St. Louis and Austin and New York, these kids, first off, are very, very fortunate to have these societies care about them and really bring teachers there to teach them on a consistent basis. It's not just like us going there and leaving and then they're like, they don't hear about guitar again for another year. They're getting they're getting weekly lessons.
That's great.
But then when we go there and present the music, we're playing it to them as if it is like a real concert. We're not, but we are talking a lot more about the pieces in the background. But yeah, I love it when we ask students sometimes, what do you think of when you think of classical music? That's the first question we'll ask. And then they'll say, old people, white wigs, and then we'll play a piece by Ben Verdery and they're like, what? This is classical. This is classical guitar. And we're like, yeah. And then they get super excited. And a lot of them, end up pursuing guitar or, wanting to play, and it's just nice to open their ears a little bit to see that there are other types of classical guitar. It doesn't have to all be 19th century
Do you kind of bill it as classical guitar when you go to these schools, or is it just guitar? Is it given a label that has the word classical in it, or do you just?
I still bill it classical guitar. I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't really use the term, or again, I don't know. I don't get too much into that, but I think it's just easier to call it classical guitar.
Well, it's just funny, just because I've sort of been thinking about this a bit, like, on and off. It's like, is that just a sort of remnant of the insecurity of guitar generally wanting to be taken seriously by like the classical music world? So we stick classical in front of it because no one says classical violin, classical cello. But like, so it's, and I wonder, like, this is where guitar wins, because like guitar is just, school is so unbelievably mundane and boring for everybody. You know what I mean? So then if a guitar player comes into your school, you're just like, today doesn't suck quite as much as it's just a lot better. Like, life is a lot better. I went to a primary school that was like, there was about 56 kids in this school. It was in a tiny village in Scotland. And we just happened to have a guy in the village who was the son of the headmistress. And he like performed all over the world in circus, he was a circus performer. And he was one of the world's the world's best Diablo artists, you know, with the sticks with the string and the sort of ball, and you can throw it up, you know, 40 meters and catch it and flick it behind your head and everything. And one day he brought like the circus to school, and people were like swallowing swords and eating fire and stuff. Do you know what I mean? And, like, I remember it like in school just being like, what is going on? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's a bit like a book that you read. Do you know what I mean? Where you're like, blah, 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 blah. And then they were all at the circus, or like, and there goes your imagination. And like, you know, I don't know about yourself, like what yourselves were like at school, but like, I just thought school was kind of like, yeah, it's fine, but like, it's not really that exciting until the circus comes to town, or until like there was a music workshop, or until the actors came in and did something, you know. And it's like, you've got kids are just desperate. They're desperate for this imagination and stimulus, like all the books they read when they were young before they went to school, and then it's like none of those exist anymore. It's just really boring, and you have to like, you know, count, you know, and just write the same thing out 100 times. So like, you going into schools and taking this way of making it real, like visceral, and like they can touch it, you know. When you were talking about like playing a piece by Ben Verdi, and they're all like, what is that? You know, I mean, if this was like Bill and Ted and you were time traveling around, you could have probably played to a young Ben Verdi, and then he would have just come on the road with you after that. He'd have been in your band then forever, like, and never really grown up. Like, you know, I don't know, but like, you know, I mean, it sounds amazing. But I was just wondering, like, you're on such a winner with guitar. You don't even need to say classical. You know,
it's true. You know, but it's kind of fun actually in the schools, because then it kind of throws them for a loop. You know, when they hear classical guitar and then they hear the music afterwards, but. It's true. I mean, but what do you call it though? I mean, I just guitar, but I mean, it's confusing because there's nylon string and then there's the steel string and electric. That's
But then are people starting to move away from that a lot? Because like, you know, what you were saying, like your album, you didn't say it was all women guitar composers.
Yeah,
you just said it was an album by your duo, and then you know, you've got this music on it. It's like, you know, we're getting so obsessed with labeling things right now that like then it's like, you know, our vocabulary makes no sense anymore. Like the words we actually use have no meaning because we're all agreeing on the ones that are okay. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, I've got 50 words I can choose from to explain what it is I'm doing, because we're all agreed that these 50 words are okay, right? Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, maybe a little bit more sophisticated than that, but anyway, let's use those 50 words. You know, it's like, I mean, if you rocked up at my school when I was like 9, I'd been like, yes, here we go. We're going to have a great afternoon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't think you'd. I doubt you'd care. You know what I mean? I think it would just be like, well, the circus has come to town again. You know, and actually, I think another thing actually that Chris you're touching on is this real sea change on the part of guitar societies. This is a topic that Matthew and I have discussed on a few occasions. Like, oh, we should do a show on this. But I think it does start with our friend Matthew Hensley and in Austin and the spirit of, not even a spirit, and like a stated intention. This guitar society will perform a function in the community writ large. Like this is what we're for. We don't just exist to put on a guitar concert for a handful of people who are, you know, really, really passionate about these, you know, 5 or 6 different performers or these 5 or 6 different composers, but you're seeing community involvement, and this involvement is reciprocal, and you're, I think,
do you get a cape though? Do you get a cape? Do you get a cape?
A cape?
Yeah. And like the little, you know, that little mat, and then like a sidekick and a nickname. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, lightning guitar. I don't know, something. Do you know what I mean? Better than that, like, you know. But you know what I'm saying? It's like I'm with you, Matt. Like, I think I admire all the Austin Classical Guitar Society stuff and everything, but like I also kind of think that like we're not saving people from burning buildings. Do you know what I mean? We're like we're trying to inspire people, like, you know, to just like have, like, that's why I know I'm joking about school being so boring and so mundane. Of course it's not, but like I just think that like sometimes we overcomplicate the art in terms of its presentation so much that then it's diluted down before it hits, you know, and it's just the impact of it is just so magic. Like, you know, it's just when you were talking about it, Chris, I was like, I would kill for that. And you were saying that, like, you know, the Cleveland and St. Louis and all these different, or St. Louis, sorry, are all starting to do these things. It's like, it's amazing. I mean, we don't really have anything like it over here. We have a lot of outreach in schools, and we have a lot of community music, but I often feel that it slightly has that, it's like, it's the really cold face kind of like, you know, work. And I'm like, it's not. That's what the social care workers are doing. Do you know what I mean? That's what there are other people doing that stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, you're in just trying to make the day better, the life better, inspire someone to pick up the music, or like you say, it has a teacher going in every week after that to support it. So it's not just one amazing day and then, oh my God, it's back to, you know, like we don't see a guitarist again for another 6 months, you know? But, you know, it just, I mean, I guess I'm a bit iconoclastic in the label vibe. I'm like, if we could get rid of the labels, then it's open to everybody. Because, you know, you said, right, you know, women classical guitarists, obviously Justin Holland being a black man. Then we're thinking about classical music and guitar not being a classical instrument. So we've got an in and a way, you know, and are we exploiting it or not exploiting it by getting it there? It's just, it's fascinating, you know?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I even noticed like a lot of these guitar societies are losing the classical label in their name. You know, it's like Austin guitar, St. Louis guitar, Cleveland guitar. So they're trying to become more encompassing. But I mean, in terms of putting labels, you know, I tend to still call, when I refer to Justin Holland, I still refer to him as like an African-American guitarist, because I think it is important for people to know that that he's not just, you know, a 19th century guitarist, that he was black. Yeah. And maybe someday, though, you know, it's like Justin Holland will just be another guitarist. I was talking to somebody in Chicago. This her name is Sarah, amazing guitarist and really great person. But she was saying that, you know, she can't wait to the day that that Justin Holland, that she's sick of hearing Justin Holland. You know, she can't wait till the day that someday when she hears Justin Holland, she's like, not again. You know, like, oh my gosh, so much. I was like, yeah, that's kind of funny. You know, it's like, she took me for a loop. I wouldn't know where she was going with it, but it's true. You know, it's like, you know, just like the beginning, I think, of something, and eventually, I think, hopefully, it'll just become part of the canon. Just like now that we're looking at, you know, women composers and all of that stuff. So
it's a normalization of things as well. You know, I mean, it reminded me of like a really cracking story. The first time I'd ever done like a really fancy chamber music sort of society, and it was in Edinburgh, and it was like quite a big deal to do this. And there was some Poulenc on our program, and I remember going to do the concert and overhearing this like old lady talking to her colleague, like her friend that were out for the concert, and she was just like, you know, I've just been listening to too much Poulenc this month. I don't know if I can take another, you know, sort of French, you know, sort of slightly impressionistic sort of, you know. And I was like, I don't think anyone's ever said that sentence. You know what I mean? Like, I was kind of like, you know, just, it's just a completely unusual place for me to be in that I was like, what? You've had, like, you know, I'm like, how does anyone overdose on that? Well, that's, like, you know.
That's as far opposite as you can get from playing in some of these schools in St. Louis, man.
Yeah, exactly. not the foie gras again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Interesting comment here from Gail about the Guitar Society in her town. Yeah, that's I'm interested to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's something that, you know, is for a future show or a future discussion with a panel, is that, like, you know, we've talked a little bit about some of the things that guitar societies, especially in America, are doing that are really helping and spreading the instrument's sort of popularity and appeal. And maybe there's an episode where we actually bring people on and say, what would you want your guitar society to do? What function do you think it serves? You know? There's only so many times we can talk about what strings we want to use.
Right. What is the, and I think there's a little bit of soul searching going on, at least in the States, for what the function can be. First of all, for the sake of relevancy, I would imagine, and survival. But also what purpose can it serve for the community that it's that it's part of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and before we go on too far away from this, Matt Hensley and everybody at Austin Guitar, like Matt Hensley, Travis Markham, and Joe Williams, man, they are such geniuses.
Yeah, they are.
Oh my God, man. It's, just going and seeing what they're doing there.
Yeah.
It was really just, it blew my mind. And, we went into one school, and it was a school where Travis Markham, he's the director of education of a class of Austin Guitar. He went into the school, and he was like, this is the first school from the program. And he never worked with those kids before. And then the teacher was like, would you like to come conduct the orchestra? No, the kids, in the class. And Travis just went up and he threw his arms up, and like the kids just stopped. It was the craziest thing. It was just like everyone was silent, and he never worked with them before. And it was just like this beautiful reading of this piece. And I was like, this is a real genius of like classroom education, man.
Yeah.
But as to Gail's point, I think what really it takes is just a passionate president of this society. I mean, that's the one thing that Austin, Cleveland, and St. Louis all have. Presidents of the societies who are very, very passionate about the community engagement, but they don't brush aside the artistic part of it at all. They still bring in the great artists. They're still kind of catering to that, but just really pushing, trying to do better within the schools and the communities. But it also depends where the Guitar Society is. Some places might not need community engagement as much as others. So yeah.
But those are the places that actually that could do more, because they probably have the resources to do a lot more.
Yeah.
And, I think it's also about being proud of your own. I mean, like I mean, and without that sounding too territorial or sort of like nationalistic or something, but it's like, if you have a young player who's successful from a society, or people have sort of supported or watched that player, come through the ranks type thing, that's really good as well, because it's sort of like, well, there we've promoted that individual, we've supported that individual, and then they've gone quite far. I mean, here in Scotland, we had that with people sort of interested in the career of a lot of young musicians who then went on to be quite successful with guitar, and it's important to have that provenance and that sort of lineage.
Yeah.
Like John Williams and Len Williams in London, in the Guitar Society there, Julian Bream rocking up and playing at Guitar Societies in London when he's really young. I mean, it's almost like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to put, sorry, I know Kevin's points that we've been putting up about just sort of like him finding out about, hearing about Holland in the 1970s when he found a copy of his method at an auction. And then he was just sort of saying, like, he wondered if, he'd always wondered if Holland had visited, Cleveland, Oberlin, Ohio, these kind of places. And obviously then, sort of we discussed quite a lot about him actually being a student at Oberlin, and that being your alma mater as well, Chris. So it's just, I know they were from the previous part of the discussion, but I just wanted to flag them up on screen because it was lovely to sort of hear that from Kevin. So thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Kevin.
Yeah.
You found a copy in a barn auction. Wow.
That's what he was saying of the method.
That's where we're going to find all those original compositions someday, man.
So, you'll be like,
get on it. Let's do it.
you know what people have got in their attics or their basements, So you'll find.
Yeah.
Real estate musicology.
Yeah. One more quick point to what you were saying, Matthew, about someone coming up through the Guitar Society. I'm going to call out somebody really fast who's a great young guitarist. He's at Oberlin now, actually. His name is Damian Goggins, and he started off in the Cleveland Guitar Society. Was just a student in one of the schools. And I've talked to him about it a bunch. He said that he didn't even want to take the guitar class, and he's just like, I don't want to do it. And then his teacher forced him to do it, and he went and picked up the guitar, and it just changed his life completely. And now he's a sophomore or junior at Oberlin. I was his mentor for a year through the GFA mentorship program. And he's the type of person now that you're going to see become a professional musician and be like, he came from one of those schools in Cleveland and are now, doing it in the real world. And he can go back and help other students in the society. So
Damien came to Interlaken for a couple of years through the camp, and it was a relationship between the Cleveland Classical Guitar Society and Interlaken. And
he's great.
Damien's amazing, and is a real for sure. That is exactly a great testament to what happens when you get a really talented, driven student with mentors and support network that can help when you have students who are really pointed in a particular direction. So shout out to Damien.
Yeah,
hope you're watching, buddy.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. It's like there's a responsibility thing there that I think is quite. I mean, we've got quite a lot of stuff going on in the chat, and I'm not going to kind of share it all because I think some of it probably speaks to another episode where we talk about guitar societies and maybe have directors of guitar societies on. But just thinking about it in the context of this little part of our conversation, and if people are looking at the chat later on, this might make even more sense. But there's a responsibility when you're in a club that it's not just all about sort of just going there to do your own thing, and just going there to enjoy yourself. That the reason why you're all interested in a topic and you're bringing your time and your effort and your energy and your money and your commitment and your dedication to that is a sharing. And of course, like we've all been at guitar societies where you go, oh yeah, there's the people that don't get that. And it's all about them and they're doing their thing. And I think some of that's been talked about in the chat. But that's the thing, when you have like youth to rally around, talented, skillful people who are discovering this stuff for the first time, like what Chris said about Damien there, and like, it's like I would never have done this had I not had this experience. There's a responsibility to the membership of guitar societies to look after and sort of foster an environment in which people can go, okay, yeah, I can explore this. And there's no ceiling to those young people because off they go, and you just see how far they get and how far it takes them. And it's like, you're actually part of that. You're part of their career if it's successful, like Damien now at Oberlin, or I can think of players like Ian Watt and Sean Sheeby here in Scotland who, like, they were appearing at the Guitar Society up in Aberdeen, or they were coming to the local festivals, and we would see them when they were really young, and you'd be like, okay, and they would be, people can actually remember early performances or remember, moments where things just are getting better and better, and it happens across all these guitar societies and guitar clubs. And the membership sort of, sometimes I think it's an easy thing to forget that you're actually part of. Imagine being at the tennis club and Rafael Nadal turns up at 8 and you get the chance to like play a bit of tennis with him, and then 20 years later you look at that, do you know what I mean, or whoever it is, like, and it's like you're actually, it's more than just a simple kind of hobby. And I think like these guitar societies, like they have a fantastic, some of them have an untapped thing about them, but maybe it's for a different show. But I think really interesting that it sort of appeared tonight out of some of the things that we've been talking about, Is it time to hear a bit more music? I think I've got a performance of the duo that you were talking about, the really the commission that was so easy, which was Clarissa Sad, I think you mentioned, Chris, everything was ready to go. So I'm hoping I've got a little bit of that to share with everybody now. So we'll just see if we can get, I think the piece is called Hocus Pocus, I think.
Klutzy Witches.
Here we go. Wow. Very cool. What a nice piece.
Yeah, it's a great piece. I think I mentioned earlier, we gave her free rein to make it as weird and crazy as she wanted. And then in the second movement, there's actually part of the score is just a circle, and you have to read the music around the circle while you improvise with the spoon. So each of us have to do a spoon improvisation. It's pretty cool. It's kind of the highlight of a lot of the shows. I think you can play all this crazy hard stuff, and then all everyone remembers is the spoon solo.
Is it not a piece for clarinet where like you disassemble it as you go? It's either it's quite a famous piece, and like you take it off and you're finished at the very end, like like this. But the piece is amazing. I can't remember. It'll come back to me at some point. But yeah, these things, they just end up being the memoir, like of the entire experience. Like, what can you do? Yeah. So that sounded amazing. I mean, just such a rhythmical piece, so interesting. So. Yeah, and that whole video is on YouTube. So for people that want to check that out, they can go and listen to the whole piece, because obviously we just played a little snippet there.
Yeah, it looks like someone's asking if the Assad piece is published.
Oh yeah, there we
are. Yes, I think it's available on Clarice's website, so you can go there and purchase the music. There's 3 movements. It is called Hocus Pocus, but the first movement is Abracadabra, the second movement is Shamans, and then the third movement is Klutzy Witches. So
yeah, that's a good title.
Love it.
Title.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
But you have more than one duo, right? You're not only in one guitar duo. You're in 2.
Yeah, we want to know, how do you do it? What?
I know.
That's wild. What?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just so you know, I'm completely faithful to Matthew.
I don't know that actually that's quite true, Matthew. I think you and Martha have put out a lot more videos than you and I have in recent days. So.
And Martha, is that your daughter that you're playing duos with?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. We could talk offline. I'm going to have a kid in a couple of months, and someday I want to play guitar with them. But I feel like I've heard so many people say it's very difficult to teach your own child how to play. But you're doing it, man. You're playing duos with your kids, so that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's a huge amount of fun. And keeping it like that is probably the key. Don't make it serious, like because occasionally I'm like, well, that was an absolutely terrible. That was a really bad thing. What are you doing that for? I mean, like, come on. Like, I mean, it's just like, what? And then you go, oh no, wait a minute. Yeah, exactly. It's like you call that Ponticello? Wait till you see it. You have to really, it's an amazing experience, and I'm sure you're looking forward to a couple of months from now. Then that's going to be super exciting.
Congratulations!
Yeah, that'll be amazing. Well, come back to me for tips. I'll let you know how it's going.
Yeah, for sure, man.
If the video suddenly stops, you'll know that she's like, no, I've had enough.
That's how I'll know. I don't even have to ask. The video just stop.
Just stop.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. I love seeing them, man.
Yeah.
They're pretty funny. There's a few outtakes that will be shared at some point. That are really hilarious. I mean, I made a mistake one time. One of the accompaniment parts goes from major to minor and back to major, and I stayed in the minor for too long, and it's now like literally all the time. Martha's like, do you remember that time? Do you remember that? Do you remember what happened? It went to E major, and G sharps weren't there. It was still G natural, and you're like, I remember. I'm really sorry. So, be careful what you wish for, Chris. It's humbling. It's humbling. And so, tell us about your other duo.
So my other duo is with Robert Miller, and he's the person I own my school with, the California Conservatory of Music, and we've been playing together for actually a really long time as well. We started playing together in 2010, and it's such a different experience playing with the both of them, because first off, Thomas and I live on opposite sides of the country, so when we rehearse, it's very we have to get together, and it's 6 to 8 hours of rehearsing. We have to make sure we just don't waste any time at all. With Robert, it's nice because then we can spend time throughout the week working on pieces, and just an hour here, an hour there. And we're basically together most of the days because we're at the school. So it's a different rehearsal experience. But we also play some more traditional music, but we've also been commissioning some pieces as well. So we commissioned a piece by Javier Farias recently based on the Pan American Unity mural, which is a 5-panel mural that Diego Rivera painted here in San Francisco, and each movement is based on a different panel. And we had that commissioned to pair with a piece by Simon Ilarnati, I think is his name. It's like his piece, Frida, based on paintings by Frida Kahlo. So when we play those pieces, we have the projector project the art behind us as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been playing together for years, and I think the clip that you have is us playing Zita by Piazzolla, right?
It is, yeah. We're going to come to that in a minute. It's a great piece. I love that piece.
Love it.
Yeah. First time I ever heard that piece was the Assad brothers. They came to Scotland a couple of times, and they came not long after the first time they just released their Rameau, Scarlatti and Couperin album. And they did a whole first half, which was just that album, basically. It was like 45 minutes of music, and it was incredible. And then they just went nuts in the second half, and it was all Piazzolla. And you were like, I don't know, I was 17 or something, and I was like, well, that's it. That's it. That's what it is, and that's what it's going to be from now on, So there we go. That's great. Yeah. It's so good. But the Zita is such a good tune. Such a good tune.
Amazing tune, amazing arrangement. It's just, they found just a perfect piece to fit on the guitar. So
it's perfect. Yeah. I think we both share the same feeling of that, like long distance sort of like get together and rehearse for a really intensive period, and then do a show, do a gig, whatever. I mean, that's because obviously we're I'm in Scotland and Michigan. It's like we share the same pain, I think, on that. It's like it's difficult,
So do you guys usually fly out like a day before or 2 days before? How do you do it?
Well, it's been kind of like at the moment more intense than that. It's been like flying out for a period of time, and I'll be there. I'll be in June. I'll be out for about 2.5 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And then Matt was just over here at the end of January into February. So, and before that November. So it was almost working like in that kind of pattern, but
yeah. We'll have 2 days of rehearsal when Matthew comes here in June. Yeah. And then we'll have sort of a couple long teaching days, and then the performances are toward the end of the week. So this one will be it'll probably feel a little bit easier than why did I say that? I really the words came out of my mouth. And I thought, come back in. Don't. Yes.
Come back.
I'm gonna just stop talking. Why don't you guys take it from here?
Easy. Yeah, we could play guitar in 2 different continents, but anyway, like it's intense, but probably I don't know, maybe you feel the same, but you're really efficient then when you get together.
Yes.
You've got that time and you've got to maximize it, so you sort of get to it right away, and it's like you get it done.
Yeah, exactly.
There's less procrastination.
Yeah, there was one day where we flew in the day of a concert, and I'll never do that again. Like we hadn't played together for a few months, and then we flew in the day of the concert. I took a red eye, and we landed, and I didn't sleep at all before the concert. I mean, luckily it went well, but we literally just sat down. We went and just rehearsed up until like we had to go to the dress rehearsal, and then after that we were like, all right, never again.
Not again.
Yeah, you do. It's strange how you do learn your parameters by hitting a wall every time. You know what I mean? Like you find out what isn't possible by it being not possible or not fun.
Or what you didn't think was possible is possible, because I mean I think like
that happens too. That's true.
You said the show went well. I mean it's a funny thing, but like I'm telling students this all the time about perfect preparation, like having all the things that you need all align, like all the stars align. Your nails are perfect, you're on time, the venue's the right temperature, it's a sold out hall, but hey, no pressure, because you're like it's never like that. It's always a total nightmare, and quite often then it goes okay, and you're like, right, okay, that's fine. Maybe all those years of practice were actually worth something. Like,
that's true.
it's sort of preparing for these moments is kind of part of it. But the efficiency of the time is probably the key thing. I mean, we're doing a lot just now, going back and forth. I don't know if you do this, but we're exchanging not just ideas, but like Matt's writing a lot of stuff at the minute. I'm getting a lot of stuff arranged. It's like we're working on like the sort of, I think in a way you get a lot of the questions out the way before you start rehearsing.
Yeah. That's that we have to do that, especially with like a newer piece that's commissioned. We're, sending recordings to each other. We're talking about phrasing. So then we come together. It's just ready to start rehearsing, and all of those preliminary questions are answered. And even like meeting with the composer on Zoom. I mean, together. So there's just a lot of prep work that goes in.
Yeah. That's it.
Matthew,
I'll let you answer this question because it's
I'm happy to answer this.
You know what you're doing on this topic.
We'll have 3 to choose from. One will be on the Interlochen campus, and we are still negotiating some dates for that. So stay tuned. If you are close to Interlochen for that concert. The other one will be in Frankfurt, I believe on the 24th. Of June, and I believe those tickets are available right now. I said 3, but I'm going to kick myself the second we get off this line, but I'm completely blanking on the third concert. But
that'll be the one that I have to fly in and just do the same lunchtime. So
that's the one to see.
But we'll keep you posted for sure. I mean, obviously it's Tail Dragger that's asked that question, and I'm sure we'll be chatting about that before I get out to
Michigan. We certainly will. Yeah,
but it's sort of like mid to late June. I'm over, and there'll be lots of things happening then as well. But we're doing a bit of teaching together, Matt and I, at the Interlochen guitar intensive. But we wanted to come a little bit to your teaching. I know we've kept you a while, Chris. I know we're about an hour and 20 deep here, and people are still sort of watching. But we wanted to just chat a little bit about your teaching, and Matt had spoken to me about like the success of some of your students and things like that. So we wanted to just hear from you a little bit on that before we play some music and sort of round off the show tonight. So maybe like, I mean, as a UK guitar teacher over here, like, there's a whole scene over there in the US that I'm not oblivious of, but I don't know too much.
The scene here for young musicians, I think is still pretty new. And I think GFA helped usher it in 2005 when they started the first GFA youth competition. I think there was like a mixture of that and a mixture of Suzuki becoming more popular. So the way I got into Suzuki teaching is around the same time that I met Robert Miller, the one that I'm playing Zita with.
Mm-hmm.
I moved back out to California after my grad school, 2010, and started working for Frank Longue at the Longue Conservatory of Music. And Robert was already teaching there.
Legendary.
I mean,
legendary.
Him and William Kostler were the two that really kind of spearheaded the Suzuki method for the guitar in like 1983, and worked with Shinichi Suzuki and compiled the books and got the committees together. I mean, they've done so much for the guitar and for Suzuki. And teaching at his school was really not just like a job. He called it an apprenticeship. So throughout the week, on Mondays, we would sit down and go through each of our students, and we would have to talk about each one, make notes on them. If they weren't practicing or if their parents weren't showing up, we would have to like red flag them. Like, there was like a whole system. He had a whole like database that he built to like track each student.
Wow.
So we would go through each student, and then throughout the week we would teach. And then on Fridays he would do like an hour or two of Suzuki training with us. But throughout the week, we can always ask questions from him. I remember he gave me a student who was 2.5 years old. Her name is Celeste. She's still my student. She's like 16 now, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
2.5. Yeah. So yeah, we were teaching there for a few years and learned a ton. Wow. But then he suddenly passed away in 2011 from a lung embolism. It was like just the most sudden thing ever. Said goodbye to him on Friday night and then just never saw him again, So from there, Robert and I started our own school called the California Conservatory of Guitar. And we built it up to around like 400 guitar students. And then in 2017, we opened the second location and then introduced piano, violin, and voice. And now it's the California Conservatory of Music. And we have something like 50 teachers and 1,400 students. But anyways, so
wow,
what the teaching part now. So I learned a lot about teaching Suzuki, and there were already really good students that Frank had at the school. You know, he had like a whole advanced ensemble. And I think that having those advanced students was a huge impact on our young students at the time that were just starting with us. Yeah. And then they kind of just feed on each other, you know, like they would see them and perform, like there was always performances. They would see them in group classes, and then the younger kids would practice. And I think one huge thing about Suzuki too, as you guys might know, it's that the parental involvement, you know, they have to come to each lesson. Yeah. Before the child starts, there's a parent education where the parent has to take lessons for a period of time. Frank did it for 12 weeks, which I thought was crazy. You know, like 12 parents had to come every Friday night for 12 weeks for an hour, and learn about the Suzuki method and learn about guitar. I remember one time, this is a little bit off top, but one time this one father was in there and he was having trouble playing Twinkle. And Frank was like, you know, put your three goes on the D. And he was just like having trouble doing it. And then he completely flipped out. He almost threw the guitar down. He like went outside and I saw him out the window, like pacing back and forth. And then the dad came back in and his wife was like, honey, it's just Twinkle. You know, I was like, oh my God. So Frank would not let him go.
Twinkle at the start. It's not different. It's everything.
It's everything, man. But Frank, I mean, even with the parents, you know, he would not let them pass the parent education class unless they could play all of Twinkle, and they had like a performance of them. So I mean, like it was like a serious standard, and we still do the parent education. It's just 3 weeks, private though, you know, not a group lesson. But you know, having our young students see all of that, you know, our younger students started really getting into competitions as well. So, you know, quite a few of my students, you know, they get to a certain point in the Suzuki books, and then I ask them, like, do you want to continue in the Suzuki books, or do you want to maybe look at some competitions? If they don't want to do competitions, then, you know, that's it. We don't have to ever talk about it again. They can continue on their Suzuki books. But if they want to start doing competitions, we kind of start them locally. You know, there's quite a few local competitions, and then they start building up more and more. And then in 2016, it was when the first time my student made it to the GFA youth competition, and that was Jack Davison. And we were all kind of like mind blown, you know, both Robert and I, and you know, Jack's mom, even Jack, you know, he was like 11 years old and he was playing Asturias and he was in the finals of the GFA youth competition. We're like, oh my God. And I think from there, you know, like the other students just started getting more motivated and wanting to practice. And we just kept doing what we do. And we've had now several students. Rob has had Eric Wong, who was at our school. Now he's at Stanford and studying with Mung Su at San Francisco Conservatory. He won GFA youth and the Stroud. Jack has won the GFA senior division and the Stroud, and his little sister Elle. And it's just crazy, you know. And it's my student Francesca, and made into the finals. So it's I think, you know, of course, you know, it has to do with our teaching, but I think it's really just them feeding off of each other as well, you know, just seeing each other in these competitions and being in this environment. I mean, that's part of the reason why we call it the conservatory, is because we think of it as an institution where, you know, we have music theory, we have group classes, we have private lessons weekly. They come to these competitions, they do community engagement. So it's a private music school, but we treat it in a way that it's you know, attached to, it's like a pre-college type of thing. So
it's a very hands-on version of a pre-college, and it's very, very impressive. You and I met when you were traveling with some of your students to a GFA, I think in Louisville.
I think it was Louisville. Yeah, it was 2015 or something.
Yeah. You were there with a few of yours. I was there with a few of mine, and it was just it's just very, very impressive.
Thank you.
What you're speaking to there is, it's just, you know, it's creating, you said like the environment, and it's creating that like you might have a student that wouldn't have gone as far as they've gone if they'd been the first generation of that, because they had nothing to play against, and they would have, oh, that person got there and I'm going to try that as well. I mean, it's like I often think of this a little bit. I know this is maybe a quite strange thing, but like I always think of some of the ones that were a little bit before, one or two that maybe had a lot of success. And I think, actually, my gosh, if it was the other way around, you probably would be as good. Like, you know, because there's that momentum and there's that feeding from and creating that environment, which is really good. coming right back to that question about guitar societies earlier on, and me sort of going about the responsibility that's there, and it's quite fascinating to sort of hear you sort of say, you were almost talking about it in chronological order there when you were giving us the synopsis right from Frank onwards. It's like, it's really nice to hear because it's not an accident. And, I know you're saying, okay, it's to do with our teaching a bit, but it's also to do with these really skillful individuals. But it's also, none of it exists without the environment in which it can exist. You've created the conditions and you've got them just right, and then you're that feeding off each other doesn't happen unless there's that place where they all can get together and kind of go, right, okay, it's healthy competition.
Yeah, exactly. It's healthy competition and they're all friends. There's nobody at our school who get, there's no hostility towards each other. There's no one who feels nervous, even like a student who, they look up to other students, like I've seen, there's several students I've had too that, when they're younger, you wonder like, okay, are they going to stick with it? And you just feel like they're going to quit. But then, now a couple of them are studying. One of them, is thinking about going to college for music and wants to go to USC, from like a little kid who really didn't think he was going to do like anything with music. Now it's like, loves it so much. And he talks about it, and as they get older, they can express how they feel too. He's like, yeah, when I was young, I know I didn't seem like I was really into it, but like Francesca or Sean really inspired me when I saw them play at this concert. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing to see that. So many years down the line, still, it's stuck in their minds. So
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic! Amazing! Congratulations!
Thank you.
Well, listen, we're probably coming towards the end of the show because we've sort of been on for about an hour and a half there. But it's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you both for having me. I love what you both are doing as a duo.
Thanks,
and Matthew Cochran, I love the new music that you're making. I listened to the what is it, the Body of
Body of Your Dreams.
Body of Your Dreams, man. I was listening to that with my wife the other day. I was tripping out, man. I was like, this is insane.
That piece is wild.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Jacob TV, man. He is.
You could listen to that
from
piece.
Another planet.
You could listen to that piece and have an entirely different experience depending on where you are and what you're doing. That could be many pieces.
And Matthew McAllister, sure. I've been a fan of yours for a long time. Of course, you might not even remember, but I interviewed you as part of an article I wrote for Classical Guitar Magazine back, like, I don't even know, 2015 or 2016 about, it was like how to balance a career as a performer and the teacher or something like that. But I kind of went through 5 different people and talked to them over email and just asked how they break things down. And then, and you were one of them. So I wanted to reach out to you because you were doing so many things at the time. I was like, I need to talk to this guy to get an insight. At that time I was trying to figure out, I was like, how am I going to keep performing and teaching and running a school? And, so I was just, I have an idea for an article. I'll talk to a bunch of people and get their ideas so I can steal them.
Well, that's funny because we were kind of hoping you were going to tell us.
Exactly.
I learned everything from Matthew McAllister. So.
Me too.
You learned nothing from me. Well, that's amazing. I do remember that. Article. Well written, and I probably gave you some, answer that you couldn't actually use, like Class A drugs or something like that, with the catalyst behind all of it, like
I took that to heart. So
yeah, exactly. That's why you're doing so well. Well, listen, it's been a delight. It really has been a delight to have you on, and you just hearing the commitment and the passion of which you spoke about Justin Holland and about teaching and about all these different facets, your duos. It's really, really amazing. So thank you for joining us tonight. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you both. It was an honor to be here.
We
finished, Matt. We've got a little clip of Zita that we can play a little bit to finish, just towards the finale of the piece. But I might hand over to you just to sort of chat about what's coming up. We've not got a date booked for our next live stream, I don't think, quite yet, but it's coming up.
Our next topic will be a tribute to the late great Roland Diens. So tune in. We've got some great guests. We're just trying to line up everyone's schedule at the moment, and so that's coming up. It will be in May. We know that. And so keep us posted. If you're liking what you're seeing, give it a share, give it a like. You know, it goes a long way. Comment on YouTube if you're enjoying what we what we say. Good luck with the practice there, Gail. Hey, Christopher, you know, congratulations on all the stuff you're doing. You know, come back and see us when you've accomplished something, you know.
I'll never see you again.
Well, I doubt that very much. We'll talk tomorrow.
Thank you everybody again for watching. And here is Zita by Astor Piazzolla.